Hello, welcome to the webinar of the Artvision Plus project. The Artvision Plus project is financed by the European Commission within the framework of the Italy-Croatia cooperation program. This webinar is part of the activities that the Artvision project offers to, in particular in this case, to students who will participate in the masterclass, which are physical events that will take place in the 4 regions involved. Artvision involves 2 regions in Italy, Veneto in the north of Italy and Apulia in the south of Italy, and 2 regions in Croatia, the Kvarner region in the north of Croatia and the Dalmatia region along the coast. It follows a previous project which was financed under the name Artvision. Again, this is Artvision Plus in the sense that it tries to add something innovative and capitalize on the experiences of the previous project. The capitalization is an essential part of what we are going to talk during this webinar, because this webinar is devoted to video storytelling and more in particular to the relationship between video storytelling, tourism, territory and cultural heritage, because the focus of the Artvision project is, as we will say later, on the prism of culture. What is the prism of culture? This is something that we will discover along the way in this webinar, but in essence it constitutes the attempt to bring into the video narration of a territory the component of culture, the arts and the cultural heritage of a given place. To start with, the background of why we talk about video storytelling and why we talk about innovating the language of video storytelling, we have to refer to the idea that in today's global environment, regions, places, cities, they compete for attractiveness. We know that in a global environment also the tourist industry becomes global. People travel, people cross borders, they go everywhere and they are attracted by places. This has developed into a form of very harsh, sometimes very fierce competition between places. Places behave like firms. They consider themselves in a market and they want to attract more clients. In this case, clients are visitors. So this is the starting point. Places compete for visitors. They want to attract tourists and they attract tourists in a competitive way. And as many other brands or products or services, one of the ways that they use to attract people is by showing with the instrument of the video how good, how beautiful, how desirable the place is. So this is why we concentrate on video making and video storytelling, because it is one of the main instruments, one of the main tools used by local authorities, tourist agencies, tourist boards, cities to attract more people in their place, in their territory. And another element that we consider in the Artvision project talking about video storytelling is the notion of culture and the idea of cultural heritage. We focus in particular on those areas. The areas in the project are areas that are not touristic in general. They are of course touristic, they attract people. But one of the reasons, possibly one of the most important reasons because they attract people, is because they contain in their territory episodes, examples, sometimes historical and very important examples of cultural heritage. And also because within those territories there are communities of artists and workers and professionals in the field of arts, culture and heritage that constitute a significant and relevant part of the economy. So this is one of the other crucial elements of video storytelling in these particular areas, in general in the world, but in this area in particular. We shoot videos, we produce videos about territories, talking about the place, but more specifically talking about the beauty of the place. And the beauty of the place is very often encapsulated into the beauty of churches, beauty of museums, beauty of villas, and also, of course, the beauty of the landscape. But the landscape, in this particular case, is always a part of the reason why people should visit specific territories. So art is an element of narration. Art is an element that we want to capture into the video. art is an element that if depicted in the right way, if depicted in the correct way, we hope attracts more people, and we hope maybe to attract the right kind of people, in particular those that prefer the type of tourism that we call cultural tourism. Art is used, as I said before, as an element of branding, of the construction, of the distinctiveness of the place. We want the places to be different from one another, because in this way we hope that people will be attracted by the specificity of a single place, by the beauty of a single place, by that particular museum, that particular church, that particular square that can only be seen in one of the places. So on one side we use art to be distinctive, on the other side we have to find a visual way of making this distinctiveness appreciable by the users. So this is one of the elements that will also be dealt by in the second part of the webinar. How do we use the video instrument to make the place at the same time desirable, visible, but also distinct and diverse from the others? So how do we combine the idea of a very broad communication and distinctiveness? This is one of the dilemmas that we will be addressing, that we address with the Artvision project in general, and the video making and the master classes and the video production in particular. One of the complexities in using videos to promote and communicate a place is that we face these days, in particular in this region, but in other parts of the world as well, one paradoxical risk. The more we communicate a place, the more we make the place known, the more we brand the place, one of the paradoxical risks is that too many people arrive. This is something that is peculiar to tourism, because in other type of markets, in commodities for instance, we can sell products, we can produce more products, and people will buy more products, and there's no major impact apart from the obvious environmental one of producing more products. But in the case of tourism, we have a spatial limitation. There is a given amount of space in which visitors can stay. Plus, as I said before, this given amount of space is crowded very often with cultural heritage and cultural beauties. So we run a risk here, the risk that we nowadays call over-tourism. How do we control major masses of people visiting a single square, a single monument, a single heritage site? This is something that is becoming a sort of a problem in our regions, but also globally, because there are poles of attraction, there are cities, there are monuments, there are heritage sites that are much visited, much more than the rest, much more than other places, other elements of cultural heritage, other museums, other landscapes that maybe are nearby, maybe they're just around the corner, but people tend to concentrate because those places have been made famous, because there have been pictures, because movies have been shot in those places. Tourists tend to concentrate in very specially limited areas. This is something that involves also video making, again, in a complex way. How do we make sure at the same time that people visit a place but do not concentrate at the same time, at the same place, in the same area? How do we use videos also to tackle the issue of over-tourism? Artvision project is there also to say something about this problem. And what we want to say with the project and with the videos we will produce is that there are other places in our regions, there are other areas that are attractive, and this is where we want to focus. We want to focus not on the obvious places, not on the places that are already pictured, that have already a visual image and a visual brand globally. We want to focus on those places that are less known, even if they are beautiful and worthwhile to visit. Artvision is concerned with less known, less famous, less celebrated areas in our regions. The aim of the project, one of the major aims of the project, is to drive attention and possibly new flows of tourism into those areas. So drive away tourism from the overcrowded places and overcrowded times. So it's an issue of time and space to bring more people, bring more visitors to places that in other times and places that are less visited. In order to do this, we use the instrument of video storytelling. Artvision from its beginning has been interested and focused on the instrument of the video, and in Artvision Plus this emphasis is even greater because we combine the video and move it away from its purely artistic dimension and cinematic dimension, and we try to combine video with tourism. Tourism already uses video a lot, so we do not something highly innovative by saying that video is useful for tourism or that tourism should use more video making. But we introduce and we reflect on the notion of video storytelling. Video storytelling has been booming in the last few years for brands, for commercial products, adding to the instrument, to the visual instruments, to the tool, the notion of narration. With the videos, we tell stories. So telling a story, telling the right story is considered the best way, the ideal way nowadays to make a product known and also, of course, to make a place known. So the question, more technical question becomes, which will be dealt by more technically in the second part, but the technical question becomes, how do we tell a good story? How do we visually tell a good story? How is a good video storytelling of a place for touristic purposes constructed? This is what we aim at doing during the masterclasses, and this is what we aim at innovating. So the objective of this process in our project is the one to bring in an innovation into what we might call the conventional forms of video storytelling. Because of course, if you want to produce something new, if you want to produce something that didn't exist before, or that creates even a small innovation in the conventional form, you have to be aware that there exist conventional forms. So there are conventional ways of shooting videos, there are conventional ways of telling the story of a territory, of a place, of a cultural heritage site with images. So this is where we depart from. This is where we depart from in our project by becoming aware of what is nowadays used mostly when a territory has to be narrated with images, with moving images. And in our search, in our analysis of the most used on the mainstream modalities of telling visually the story of a place, we encountered several mechanisms, several languages or forms of combination of languages that appear very often, that very often used in the visual narration of a place. For instance, if we browse even rapidly on Google and we search for video storytelling of territory or touristic video storytelling, we encounter, for instance, these days, videos that are on average pretty short. They aim at capturing the attention of the viewer very quickly, because we know mostly on social media there is an economy of attention. People tend to get bored very often of a video, and therefore we have to convey a so-called emotional image, an emotional vision very soon, very fast. So emotional is another key dimension of the mainstream modality of shooting videos for touristic purposes. And how do we create emotions in a mainstream way? So in a conventional mainstream way nowadays, we create emotions, for instance, by using drones. Drones are a recent innovation in the field of cinema. Different tools were used before, and technology has made available at a very low cost these devices that can fly in the air with a camera, and they can picture a place from a point of view that is not the one of the everyday user. The emotion is there. We see something from above. We see something from the sky, as if we were a bird, as if we could fly. And this is an emotional element because it captures the attention of the viewer, the possibility of seeing something from a place that we will never, if not exceptionally, be able to achieve. So the drone is one of the first elements of this grammar of video storytelling that dominates the tourist narration these days. The second element, for instance, has to do, see, if the first one, the drone, has to do with space, being above, the second one has to do with time. And here we encounter the mechanism of the time lapse. The time lapse is a very fast, accelerated shooting of a place, typically from dawn to dusk. We see the movement accelerated, of course, of the clouds, of the climate, of the people in a square, for instance. It's a still camera that captures the movements and the movement of time. Again, why is it emotional? It is emotional because it produces something that the viewer could not possibly perceive. So it creates a condition that is not human. We couldn't possibly be there for 12 hours and look at a square and remember the evolution of it. So time-lapse does something highly emotional. But again, as with drones, we find time-lapse very, very often in the narration of a place. And another element is fast cutting. Many videos telling stories of places, they need to tell a lot. They need to tell that in a place there is, yes, cultural heritage, but also wine, but also food, also good restaurants, also university, also research, also sport, and also maybe a lake and a river. How do we do that within the time frame of 2 minutes? We used fast cutting. We produce a sequence of very short frames in which we give a very short glimpse, a taste of everything that exists in a territory. Again, why is this emotional? Because it is fast. The rapidity of the images allows to picture what could not again possibly be seen by a visitor, because a visitor can't see everything, but the video takes the visitor for 3 seconds everywhere. These are some of the elements that we encounter very often when we search and when we use, and maybe when we commission a video for touristic purposes. And this is where we start from as producers of video in Artvision, because we would like to go beyond this to contribute to an innovation of this. And how is it that we do this? It's in the name of the project. It's in the claim of the project. We want to do this through the prism of culture. So how do we unpack this notion of the prism of culture? A prism is an element that multiplies. A ray of light comes in and many colors are expanded on the other side. This is a good image of what we would like to do with Artvision. We would like to show not only the physical dimension of cultural and cultural heritage in a place, but we would also like to show the viewer that in a given territory, culture is a process. Culture is something that is produced by people, it's produced by professionals in the field of culture. It's an everyday element that is lived by the people in a place. In this way, we want, in a sense, to make video storytelling of tourism, of tourist destination, more human. We would like to introduce an element of sociality, an element of professional work, an element of cultural work into the depiction of the cultural heritage and of the cultural landscape. In order to do this, we've approached the issue of video making also by looking at cultural producers locally. So this is why the masterclass is conducted in specific place. This is why the masterclass will visit these specific places and will interact not only with the cultural heritage, but also with the producers of culture in the territory.
Good morning everyone, I'm Angelica Basso, Università Ca' Foscari of Venice, and this is a webinar about video products in Artvision Plus project. Well, we know that in the audiovisual products, different media act to the definition of the meaning to generate an immersive and total narration. And if we move into the particular field of territorial video storytelling, the value of immersion is fundamental to the purpose of telling a story to enlighten cultural heritage. In particular, in the Artvision Plus project, we need to do that in a creative way. The main elements of an audiovisual product are, of course, words, images, music, sound, and places. Therefore, we need to work out these 5 elements to find the ideal fix that can achieve our narrative purpose. Of course, there are thousands of possibilities to interweave the construction elements. Then, translating a story into images means to find answers to a lot of questions. For example, what I have to show, what I don't have to show, what kind of feelings do I need to transmit? Or for another example, we can say which viewpoints are better to choose. Therefore, before starting our work, we need to focus on. Identify the focus means to give consistency, in a sensible way of course, to the narrative fragments that were gathered. Not all the news that we have collected must be included in our story. If we insert something or exclude something in our narration, there must always be a good reason. After we have identified our focus, we can of course deal more easily with the resulting next choices or resolution we have to elaborate to make our product credible. For example, choosing our subject. If you choose a determinate main subject, you need to pay close attention to its characteristics because it will become the synecdoche of your destination values. You need to find an effective narrative sequence with an original point of view. You have to find a way to make even the most imaginative stories feeling like real and concrete. You need to choose carefully costumes and other props. You need to explore how to construct shootings in a conscious way. Of course, we need also to elaborate how to use images to show something that words doesn't express. For example, gestures or symbols that helps the construction of the narrative language. You have to also imagine how to give voice not only to words but also to silences, sounds and music, taking care of the audio as much as possible. Regarding this last point, it's very important to underline that the spectator is willing to tolerate images that are not excellent, but regarding the audio is much more demanding. In fact, for example, if you have a lot of background noises and words are not really clear, this encourages the viewing. Another important two elements that we have to deal with when we think about production of audiovisual products are time and technologies. If the time is limited, don't get lost in technicalities to make sophisticated shoots. These are not always determinants for the story to be told. It's true that images are very important, but even more they must be significant for the history you have chosen to focus on. If you have the limited tools, try not to move the camera so much, because flickering shootings referring to an amateur imaginary. Try rather to give more views of an action or a sequence. This will make your story more lively and interesting. It is also decisive for the quality of the product and the optimization of the time to get in touch with local people, to visit places and location, and to know subjects as long as possible before shooting, of course. It is important to evaluate also time and techniques in terms of rhythm of the story. The viewer has not to get bored, and the passages need to be clear and understandable. We can conclude that the strength of the video storytelling does not consist in using beautiful images, but images that have a personal point of view, to tell that part of the world you are observing, that adhere to the history and become an harmonious whole with words and sounds. Let's see now some virtuous example of a video relating to tourism and cultural purpose. this first example, we can see how the goal is achieved with a simple new creative solution. The idea is to make the city of Matera like a swarm of tiny characters that, despite being real, seems to be like toys. Thanks to a particular technique, video appears funny, ironic, and incisive. In its simplicity, it works. Let's see now a second example.
Come sail your ships around me and burn your bridges down. We make a little history, baby, every time you come around.
Come loose your dogs upon me and let your
Example.
hair hang down.
In this second example, we find instead something totally different. Music is the main element, and the video looks like a music video. But through it, we can explore a place in its totality, both in space and in inhabitants. Moreover, the using of a famous song as a cultural hymn linked the video to another strong identity imaging. Let's see now a third case.
Sempre caro mi fu quest'eramo colle, ok. Mi fu quest'eramo colle. E questa siepe dell'ultimo orizzonte, questa siepe il guardo discontento, ma sedendo ignorante da quella interminati spazi di là da quella.
In the third case, it was chosen to enforce the territorial brand, the direct narration of a protagonist, an artist, that become in its own accountability the personification of the accountability of the place. If he interprets this place and I adore the protagonist, I will adore also the place instead. Creative and surprising solutions are the core of a good way to think about territorial storytelling. But how to make sense of cultural and territorial storytellings? It challenges different interpretative categories. In this kind of storytelling, there are tensions in between language and product, and they concern the attributes of accessibility, feasibility, originality, virality, and of course, usability and brand identity. The producer has to deal with feasibility, first of all, because this aspect obviously concerns the budget and the technique involved in the project. Secondly, usability. It regards the possibility of using the product on multiple platforms. It doesn't have to be a one-shot product that can be projected just one time. But for example, it can be projected in a film festival or during a seminar on cultural tourism. Another important category is your originality. It concerns, of course, the authorship and the expression of the style. In fact, it's important to be original and narrate something that is true. But it's important also to stand out from other similar projects. The consumer is related to other categories. For example, accessibility. The product has to intercept a wide target of audience. Secondly, virality, because the product must be understanding, such as it can be easily shared. The consumer is in fact part of the dissemination, is part also of the construction of the language instead. Brand identity is another important category because the product must be recognizable and we need to do the marketing of a place. The consumer is related to other categories. First of all, accessibility. The product has to be intercept from a wide target of audience. Virality. The product must have a high level of understanding, such as that it can be easily shared. The consumer is in fact part of the dissemination, but also of the creation of the language. The third category is brand identity. In fact, the product must be recognizable. We need to do the marketing of a place. Of course, all of these elements act in this field compete each other, but we must find a balance in between them because we have to make sure that one does not prevail on the others. For instance, a kind of internal tension that there may be concern, originality and accessibility could be the one that the viewer need to be able to decode what he sees. And so this is important to find the right balance in between an innovative language but also understandability. Another tension that could arise is the one in between feasibility and brand identity. Of course, to make the marketing of a place, we need a big amount of budget to make continuous actions and quality research to let the identity grow in the common imaginary. But at the same time, this investment is at the expense of the feasibility. Again, we have to find a balance. But how to solve this conflict? First of all, we need to focus on, and it is have to become the producer mantra. And of course, we can use the idea of prism of culture.